So the next job is to give another little thought to the mortise and tenon joints that I'm going to be making for the major project. Now you'll remember from a previous episode I worked on 6mm from the edge for the mortises on two sides and going only for the 10mm depth because I didn't want the two mortises to merge and give me a bigger headache when it comes to gluing up. Now thanks for the suggestion, Tim, about making the mortise and tenons longer to give more gluing area. So what I'm going to be doing this afternoon is just seeing what sort of result it will give for the cutting of the mortises on, again, 6mm from the edge, a width of 6mm, but a depth. This time I'm going to try for 20mm depth. Now these are going to be only 25mm square, so I'm going to see what the result will be. You'll notice as well, oh no you won't, because you haven't seen the mortise before, have you? I've just put a new table on, and really it's just to give me a new finish and to try and see what it's like. So just start by lining the mortise up, and tighten that, and I forgot as well the depth. I want 20mm. I've marked 20mm down there, so let's just see where the 20mm comes to. That's to there, so lower that, tighten that, and that should give me 20mm depth. Okay. There we go. And that's the first one done at 20mm deep, 6mm wide, 6mm from the edge. So just line up the second one and then cut that and see what the result is. Now normally I would cut, if you remember the legs, there are going to be 3 mortises per side, so normally I would go 1, 2, 3, and then because in the finished product that will be 6mm, I just turn it round, but this time I'm just having to readjust the fence slightly, so there we go. and I realised that had slipped, so I've gone all the way through. Never mind, this is only proof of concept. It's something that I'll need to be aware of when I come to do the actual joint. Okay, so just get a small rule, and I don't know whether you can see that there, but I can definitely see the rule. So the holes have joined, but the result is quite a nice finish on the bottom. So okay, that's how the mortises will lie. So we've got one there, one there. The next thing is to give some thought to cutting the tenons, because those are going to have to be mitered in some way, and that's where if anybody's got some suggestions, I'll be very grateful. Otherwise it's just a troll through the internet and see how I can cut the tenons and then actually miter them. So the next thing is to have a look at how to cut the mortises. Now I've already tried this on the bandsaw, but I came across a YouTube video that reminded me of another method of cutting tenons as well. So what I'm going to do on this one piece of stock is try both methods. Now I've marked up on this piece where the cuts are going to go. As I've said in a previous video, this is a scrap piece of wood, so the actual piece is going to be wider than this. This is 42 millimeters. The finished piece will be 50 millimeters wide. So that's why that line there is so close to the edge. But this is just to have a look at what sort of finish I can achieve. And the other end I'm going to mark up and use a pair of router cutters to actually prepare the joint, but that will be for another day. So today it's just getting everything set up for this tenon cut and see how this goes. When I've got the production line going, I will be cutting every single joint like that, flipping it over, cutting like that, next piece, and then I will move the fence for the next line cut. So that's all I'm doing this afternoon, is actually physically moving these fence cuts. And of course, on these joints, it's incredibly important to always work off the face edge and face side when working against the fence. So that's why I'm actually moving the fence itself. So that's those four. All I've got to do now is cut the cheeks. That's that. And that's something that's never happened before with the kickback of the little offcuts. So again, that's something I'm going to have to be careful of. But there we go. That has cut very nicely. There's the mortise, there's the tenon, that's a very tight fit. That would have to be eased a little bit. But I'm pleased with that result. That's a very even cut. So that's the bandsaw cutting. Next week I'll try setting up for the router cut, and then we'll see how that goes. So in that last segment I was cutting the tenon, cutting the tenon on the bandsaw. What I'm going to do now is just go through how I would set up the router so that I can cut a tenon on that side as well. Then what I'm going to do is see really which is the more repeatable. I've got quite a lot of tenons to cut, so one thing I want to make sure of is that everything is in the right place when I flip the piece end over end, because if you remember, everything is going to be offset 6mm from the face edge, and then there's a 10mm shoulder on both sides in the finished piece. So as I say, I'm going to set up the router bit and then see, can I repeat the cut more effectively? So there are several ways that I can do the cutting with the router. My the way that I've done this before, I have a pair of rotary cutters. The actual cutter here is 10mm wide, and they both go on this shank with varying shims, so I can adjust the depth of and the separation of the cutters. That's what I'm going to do first, is set these up so that they give a separation of 6mm, and then it's just a case of moving the cutters in the router up and down to make sure that I get the 6mm shoulder here to start with. The only problem with this method is that because these are 10mm cutters, 10mm up from here, and I've still got a shoulder that would be uncut. So what I might do, I'm just trying to test this one out, is I have a single cutter. What I could do is cut across there, but as you see that's not deep enough, or I could use the rabbit cutter and cut across there like that. So several options. I'm going to be exploring all of them in this little segment, and we'll see how it goes. Let me start by setting the shank up with the two cutters. Okay, so I've set up the cutters with 6mm gap in between the, well, it's at the moment it's got a 6mm shim inside. I'm going to be testing the cut because I want to get everything just right. Everything at the moment is just trial and error. I've estimated that gap from the bottom of the cutter to the base as 6mm. Again, it's all going to be trial and error. And one thing I've got to do, no more, the cutter has got a maximum speed of 12,000 revs. So I've turned the router right down almost to its lowest setting, and that, because it's such a big cutter, we do need a slower speed. I've got the vacuum system set up, so let's make a start. Okay, so that's the cut. That was the bottom, of course. Right. And can you see my deliberate mistake I've made? But one thing, the first thing I want to check is how big the actual cut is, and that is just 5.8. So I need a little bit more of a space in there. Lower the cutter so that I've just realised that needs to be actually on the base. In fact, the 6mm from the base needs to be to the top of the cutter, doesn't it? I'm glad I'm talking to you about this because it's helping me to get this clearly in mind. So let's make the adjustments and carry on. Okay, so I've adjusted the size of the shim. I've put an extra 0.5 millimetre shim in the middle. I've lowered the cutter, so hopefully the top of that bottom cutter will now be 6 millimetres off the base. I've squared off the end again, so let's give it a second try. Okay, so let's have a look at what the sizes are. So that is now 6.45, 6.5 millimetres. What's that like for size? That is a little tight, so a little bit of adjustment there, but we're getting there. Now, is that from the face side 6 millimetres? No, that is 5.5. Well, that's easily remedied. That's just a case of bringing that up slightly. So let me readjust those and then we'll try a second time. Okay, so adjustments made, squared off again, third time try. Okay, so the tenon this time is 6.25. That should be a nice fit. Yes, that will be a nice tight fit so that there will be no movement there whatsoever. How about the depth? And that is a tiny shade under 6 millimetres. It's actually 5.75. So up slightly, and then that depth will be fine. Let me give that a little twist. Just cut that off square again. And there we go. double take with the Mortise, the Tenon. That's still 6 1/4 as I would expect because I haven't changed anything, and from the edge bang on 6mm. So that's good, but you can see here that I now have that extra piece. That this is a difficulty with this setup because the cutters aren't deep enough, so that would be a case of taking that off at a later time. So that's one alternative that I've got, and let me work through a second option. So what I've just done is cut a full length of the tenon. So that is now 20mm deep. That's exactly 6 1/4mm thick as we measured before. And you will have noticed, although I've got the vacuum system set up, I've got a lot of dust coming this way. Turns out that the hole I'd got in the router table fence wasn't big enough. So what I've done is brought it forward so that the cutter now goes through the fence. That means when I was cutting this, most of the dust was now going through the fence. So before I go too much further, I'll be enlarging this hole so that more air goes through it and pulls more of the dust through. So that's what I've just done, cut that full depth tenon. What I'm going to do now is change the cutter so that I can take this edge off, because by doing that it will then set me up for cutting the two cheeks. That way I can then see how repeatable this is. As it is, cutting the actual tenon is going to be very repeatable using this method. All I'm going to have to do is find myself a piece of 19mm T-track to pop into this slot. Then I can use a fence to make sure everything is nice and square. As I'm going up against this fence, that's nice and square as it is, but I want to make sure that nothing twists as well. So that's why this is Ben's workshop journey, because I'm working out how to do things as you're seeing me do things here on this little clip. I've swapped the cutter for an ordinary straight bit. I've adjusted the fence so that it will take it right down to the shoulder. I'm just going to now test that to see what sort of finish it gives. Okay, so as you can see, it has taken it down to the shoulder. There's very little error there. The problem I found with just guiding it like I did was that the actual tenon would have the tendency of slipping through the hole that's why I do need the fence to make sure everything is working square, but that would take it off very nicely, and then all I would have to do would be to adjust it for 10mm either side. In fact, let me do that now. Ten millimeters is there. Down slightly. Tad more. So let's take that corner out. Okay, so what's the depth like? That is 10mm. That currently is 31.5 because of this being an undersized piece of stock. But you'll notice the difficulty I have doing that is keeping everything square, and I do have that little bit of unfinished business just there. Partly that's because of not being able to keep everything square and exactly to the depth I need, but that's something that we can work round. That might be an alternative, because where the cutter is here, I can leave it there to take out the bottom part and then just turn it round and take out the two shoulders. We're getting there. It's something that I'm going to have to ponder. My biggest problem is I know I've got some 19mm T-track somewhere. I've just got to find it. There is nowhere in this workshop that I can find my spare piece of 19mm T-track. I was sure I'd got some somewhere. I can't find it. So what I've decided to do, that's my square. I'm going to use this piece that's already fitted. That will provide a very nice parallel track. My problem is the shortness of the stock. If I have moved the featherboard out of the way, if I have a piece like that, it doesn't really give me much to hold on to keep everything tight. So what I'm thinking of doing is fitting an extension to this mitre guide, and that way I can clamp this piece to the extension, clamp this to guide, and that way everything will stay nice and tight as I move it. So all I'm doing now is sourcing a piece of timber to go on here, and then we can try again.